It's a pleasure to be here. I actually spent a year and a half at Bilkent several years ago now. I mean, I think this was 2007, 2008. I had a lot of fun memories from that year. So it's great to be back, even if it is this virtual world. Hopefully next time I will be there in person, as Refat said. Okay, so let me get right to it. So I would like to talk to you about, women in economics today, not economics, but women in economics, because this is a serious issue. We all realize that it's a serious issue and there are things we can do about it. So I'm just going to present you statistics first. Most of it is going to be from CSWEP. CSWEP is the Committee on the Status of Women in Economic Profession. It is a committee of AEA, American Economic Association, which you are all either members of or going to be members at some point. And so a lot of the slides is a collection of many of us at the board. And I also work as associate chair of this committee and the director of mentoring. So I will start showing you statistics and then talk about what we can do about this problem. So here is the issue from the undergraduate perspective. So this is the econ majors as undergrads in US institutions. So what you see here is a 45-degree line plotted white women and white men, okay? So if there's equally number of women and men picking econ as their undergraduate majors, then all the dots should be on this 45-degree line. And they are not. As you see, the fitted line, regression fitted line is below that, which says there are way more white men picking economics as their major in undergraduate studies relative to women. So if you pick a dot here, this example is University of Virginia. It's a similar size school to Bilkent. University of Maryland will be bigger. Something like Boston College will be smaller. So if you pick this dot, that will be like for, a 5 to 15 ratio. Okay, so clearly, men are going to be a disproportionate share of econ majors in undergraduate institutions in the US. This is top 40 economics programs. Then the second figure here shows you it is actually even worse when you look at underrepresented minority women. So underrepresented minority women will be Black women, Latino women. So then that 5 to 15 ratio is going to be something like 215. And then when you say, well, okay, how do we know this is, this problem is both about being a minority and woman? Well, if we just look at minority men and white men, you're actually very close to 45-degree line. This is the last figure on the slide on the right. Most of the institutions have equal representation of white men and underrepresented minority men. Most of these people will be African Americans. Blacks, they are picking equally econ as their undergraduate majors. Now, when you go to the PhD from this, it of course gets even worse. Women are more underrepresented as they advance their careers at every stage. So from undergraduate, you start your PhD. So the first two bars is going to be PhDs granted, and this shows you the time series. So the blue bar is what we have in 1994, and the orange bar is what we have in 2018. Again, this is from our annual report of CSWEP, Committee on the Status of Women in Economic Profession. And you see that there is definitely an improvement. So 24% of the PhDs were women in 1994. Now 32% of the PhDs are women in 2018. So some uptick, but obviously entire PhDs granted in the top 40 PhD granted programs in the US, only 30% is women, right? I mean, so just a third, pretty low. Assistant professor, so you got your PhD, now you're an assistant professor. That is no improvement at all, right? I mean, it was 25% becomes assistant professor in 1994. In 2008, it's 28%. That's like nothing. Associate professor, this is when you get tenure, okay? So equivalent to being a docent, right, in Turkey. So there is definitely some improvement. It used to be 14% make it to associate level in 1994. Now it's 26% of all the associate professors are women. Still very, very low number, of course, but some improvement here. And full professor. So this is like, full professor, which is the highest point in your career. In 1994, only 7% of the full professors were women in this 40 PhD granting institutions in the US, and in now 14%, but still very low, obviously. I mean, 14% of the entire full professor body being women is pathetic, basically. What is worse is the progress is stalled, right? So if you look at the time series on this from 94 to 2008, this is progress for new PhDs. So share of women among the new PhDs, it's completely got stuck, right? So there was this increase from 94 to 2004, like this entire decade, where the share of women in new PhDs goes somewhere from 24 to 32%. But then it's like complete flat line, right? So the progress is now completely stalled. And if you plot hard sciences with this, like physics, computer science, math, they are increasing. So we are worse than them right now. So that's why the problem is like so serious. So something like, you know, computer science and physics is doing better in terms of share of women among the new PhDs than econ. When you think about the minorities, of course, it just becomes like you can't even talk about it. There are not even enough numbers that you can do, you know, basic statistics. Janet Yellen raised this point recently. So this is 2016-17 academic year. Now all PhD granting institution in the US, women numbered, I'm talking about number now, not the percents or shares, just 380. 148 are US citizen or permanent residents. So the rest is international people like us. But out of that 148, it's like there's no American Indian or Native Alaskan, only 7 African American, and only 4 Hispanic and Latina. So you can't even use these numbers to do any meaningful statistical analysis. So it is a very, very horrific looking picture. Now, US is worse than Europe. We still don't understand why this is the case, but entry-level professor in United States, only 33% are women. In Europe, it's 40%. And it's not that Europe is doing great, but just a little bit better than US. And the full professor is also a little bit better. 24% of all the full professors in Europe are women, 16% in the United States. This is, of course, have to do a little bit. It is harder the standards are tougher in US. You have to publish more in high quality journals. In Europe, there are other things that will get into being a professor. So that might have to do something with it, but still US looks worse than Europe. Now, when you look at the fields, macro finance, international macro are much worse than micro. And this is something I lived all through my life because I'm a international macro and finance person. Why is this? Because micro fields are going to be fields like education, labor, you know, these fields are more natural to women. So women kind of self-select into those fields. So this is from the NBR Summer Institute presentation, share of authors who are female. And if you look at micro, like almost a third of all the papers presented in the micro fields have some female authorship. Whereas when you look at finance, it is of course horrible. And this is pretty much same across the years. In 2000 or most recent 2018, it is around like, you know, barely 10%, and macro international no different, you know, like 11%. So very, very low women participation in macro international finance fields relative to micro. It's not that micro is also doing great, but micro fields are doing better than at least macro and finance fields. Okay, so the other important point is the top journal publication. So this is extremely important to advance in your career, and female authors are underrepresented in top journals. So you see that everything is connected, right? I mean, if you cannot, you know, publish in top journals, you cannot be a full professor and so forth. So the share of papers in AER, QJE, JP, Econometrica written only by women rose only from 1% to 6%. And this is like a huge time span, right? From 1987 to 2015, very, very limited improvement. QJE didn't publish a single exclusively female author paper at all between 2015-17. Recent years, Econometrica and JP, pretty much the same. So this type of evidence is interpreted as females are held to higher standards. And I'm going to show you other bits of evidence now that we are pretty convinced that the standards for women are much higher. And this is now going to be something also in other fields, not just economics. It's just that you have to do much more than men in terms of quality and amount to be able to get the same return. And this is similar to the earnings literature too, right? The earnings inequality literature. So all these things matter, right? But why do they matter? Why we want a more diverse profession and better representation of women? Well, first, diverse teams conduct more influential research. There's a study of 2.5 million scientific papers, all US-based researchers across a large time span, 85 to 2018. And basically the key finding here is author teams with different ethnicities, different gender, different locations, they publish research in higher impact journals. Okay, it's just about the power of diversity. Diverse teams are more profitable. There's a lot of work on this in management. And this is a paper from Management Science that shows that undergraduate business school class in Netherlands required the students to work in teams to start a venture, and teams with equal gender mix perform better in terms of sales and profits than male dominated teams. And again, now we understand that this is not something that women do X better and men do X better. It's not just being better at something. It is about diversity. It is about, you know, bringing different perspectives, different points of view to the debate, to the research. Okay, and the mechanisms are going to be very straightforward, right? So, and this is exactly where the problem starts. So we understand the diversity valuable. It is going to make the research better. But of course, economists as a profession, as a field, we start from the presumption that markets are efficient. And that's our starting point. So if there's any difference between you know, male and female earning or any other thing, that has to be because of ability or preference. Okay. So the minute you start from that point, of course, then everything is going to be women's fault, right? If woman makes less, if women professors are low number, if women cannot get tenure, that has to be women's fault. And this is now, I think, the realization. This is the pretty much assumption that we operated last 30 years, and now, thanks to great data work and more evidence and more research and publication on this, we understand that this is a total false narrative. It is not women's fault. There is outright discrimination in the profession. So I'm going to show you some examples now from the work of Renee Adams. She's a professor at Oxford who studies gender in finance, and she actually shared her comments from the referee reports. And, you know, there are some examples, but you can see how, you know, we are very quick to make it women's fault. Even something like a JP referee report, like, you know, a top journal referee report written by a man, they are not shying away to say things like that. For example, you know, so this paper, this referee report is on a paper that shows paintings by women sell for less. And the referee reacts as, it is possible that female artists were less famous because they had to take time off to take care of kids. And then this affects the price. Maybe art made by males is simply better. I know it's a tricky statement, but we are scientists, right? So people, as you see, don't shy away from saying things in the referee reports like that. After your representation, network comment kept me thinking about what possibly could better explain the gender gap. This is a paper about the gender gap and how, you know, networking provides different earnings. And then the commentator says that I remember the paper that shows fundamental differences in the way males and females network, what risk they are taking and how they perform. So this again says female cannot network, they cannot take risks, just it is women's fault. Labor force participation explains broad leadership patterns, right? So, and then that referee report on that paper says, based on my observation of my wife and her friends, women seem to prefer stay at home. Complete judgmental stereotype, and it is in a referee report. Women hold fewer board seats in STEM firms. This is again research finding of a paper, and the comment on that paper is women prefer less math intensive jobs because they are more social. I mean, I think you cannot say something more stupid than that, but apparently this is something said in a referee report. Women hold fewer board seats in finance. This is again a fact now shown in several papers. The referee says women are more risk averse and shy away from competition. Women don't like math. So, I mean, we don't go that far, right? I mean, even somebody as famous as Larry Summers, who's a great economist, said actually something similar to this. So female finance professors earn less money. They are not as productive as male professors. So, I mean, so it's always that there's something wrong with women that women cannot achieve. Why again? Because you start from this assumption. You start from this assumption that markets are efficient. So if women cannot do it, that means there's something wrong. Okay, so of course there is something to childbirth. There's a lot of literature on this. So the penalty at the first childbirth is huge for women. This shows that on the earnings, there is like a huge drop at the point of first childbirth, and it lasts your lifetime, right? This is like 20 years after the childbirth, nothing happens to men's wages. Okay, this is the husband wages, and this is the wife wages, they never recover. This is in terms of being a manager, again, so after the first childbirth, your probability that you are going to become a manager drops significantly, and you never recover after 10 years, where nothing happens to me. Now, this is from a paper in AEJ, but there are many papers like that which tells us actually something that we did wrong, right? In many universities right now in the US, there is gender neutral parental leave policy. So when a child is born, and if both parents are professors, they both take a leave. This is obviously a wrong policy. We have to revert this. It should be only the woman or the main, person, the main caregiver should take the leave, right? I mean, now again, this is a paper in AER, but there are other work too that shows that gender neutral clock stopping policies decrease female tenure rates in top 50 economics department by 19 percentage point, while increasing male tenure rates by 17 percentage point. So this is actually really ironic, because both husband and wife gets the leave when the child is born, and then the man publishes more and the woman publishes less. So it's not that the policy is wrong, it makes the problem worse, right? We are trying to level off the playing field by giving this parental leave. So this is known as the stopping the tenure clock in US, but apparently we made it worse. So a lot of universities now trying to reverse this policy, trying to give it only to women. But this is something very, very important, because at the end, this is going to be something at the end is going to affect many things. The share of white women majoring in math has increased in past 15 years. So, I mean, it is not very visible here, but if you, as I said, if you do this for physics and computer science, you see it even more clearly. So this is white women in math. You see the increase here in yellow dashed line. And URM underrepresented women in math. Again, you see here the increase from 2010 onwards in blue dashed line. And econ stalled and went back, basically. Both white women in econ and underrepresented minorities in econ. Female author papers actually cited more. We have less of them, but they are cited more, which again speaks to this point that female economists are held to higher standards. So study of editorial decision and referee recommendation at 4 major journals found that accepted female authored papers cited 25 times more, again, suggesting a higher bar. Female author papers are written better. Again, this suggests a higher bar. You really have to produce a much better product, much higher quality product relative to your men colleague to get into AER, right? That's what it says. This is Hengel's work, publishing while female. Again, it is, there are several things to judge this. One of this is this readability score, but basically female author papers are just better. At the same time, though, again, this kind of the penalty part, women get less credit for co-authored work. So men who are tenured roughly the same rate, regardless of whether they are co-author or solo author. So as a man, you come up for tenure, you have solo author papers, co-author papers, it doesn't matter. Women, if the papers are co-authored, are going to be penalized. And if they are co-authored with men, they are going to be penalized more. So this is actually very, very important work in JPE that shows this. Again, this is outright discrimination. This is actually one of the best pieces of evidence that shows that there is outright discrimination against women in economics. Women do more service work. This is what Refet is mentioning at the beginning. I mean, I spent so much time on this cause with no return. I could have easily have more AERs with the time I spend on this, if I spend on writing those AER papers. But I do care. I mean, as Refet was saying, this is very important. I mean, I am a true believer on the saying that be the change you want to see in the world. I mean, we want this change and we have to do something about it. All of us has a responsibility here, and I decided to do something about it. But it is true that we do more service work. So not only in terms of what I do, in CSWEP, but also in department, right? So all sorts of tasks from organizations, seminar organizations, student work. Women faculty picks this up well, men faculty just says no. Same thing with the promotion letters, referee letters. I am editor now. I know how many times men declines these things as opposed to women. So this is very important. So in general, service to the profession and service to your department, women are always there when a man is not, because it is very low private return activity. Students, unfortunately, evaluate female and non-white instructors much more harshly. So male students express a bias in favor of male professors. Men are perceived by both male and female students as being more knowledgeable, having strong class leadership skills, despite the fact that students appear to learn as much from women and men. Unfortunately, this is some institutions don't look at teaching evaluations much, but some institutions, these are super important, again, hampering the career of the woman. I'm sure you heard the very famous statement that men always use. For another man, oh, he's so smart. For a woman, she's hardworking, right? Woman is the hardworking and man is the smart. So this is something, it's just so annoying now when I hear this, I immediately confront that person. So, but this is something you will hear a lot in economics. Men always being regarded as smart, where woman is a hardworking person. Okay, this is a very famous article. It was in New York Times last week by Dupa, Modesta Niederle, and Wolfers. It is an amazing set of work. So these set of authors, they sat in seminars everywhere in their departments, at NBR, American Economic Association meetings. It was top article at New York Times last week, made a huge splash. You should also read the New York Times coverage. But basically, they took notes on what is going on in seminars, and they proved what we know always. I mean, women always know. I mean, this is the story of my entire career, that women face more hostile audiences in seminars. They have so many examples, but from ranging how many questions women ask, how many times women interrupted relative to men, and how patronizing attitude women have to deal with. Again, this is a figure from their paper, but New York Times article gives many examples with names actually. So you should definitely look at that. So basically, one quote from their paper, which I put it here because you should not be this person, right? I mean, you are young and moving on with your career. You should avoid at all costs to be this person, where the authors note that despite warning the room that she was running out of time, the questions continued. Nearing the end, one male professor insisted on an answer to a previous question with which he was unsatisfied, continued to speak over her for a time when she tried to move on, and instigated an entire corner of the room to talk over her. There was no time left at the end for Q&A, and despite cheer responses and confidence throughout the interruption, this closing question disruption seemed especially demoralizing. Okay, so they have many examples in the papers. New York Times article picked up the most vivid one. When I read the New York Times article or the paper, nothing new to me. I mean, again, because I was subjected to this behavior all the time, but I realized my male colleagues, some of them were shocked. That's a very interesting observation for me, because this says they didn't even realize what is going on. Okay, so this awareness asymmetry is unbelievable. So we all know this. This is our careers. We live this through, and then there is this other half of the population. Most of them don't even know what is going on, and they didn't realize that the problem is this serious. Toxic attitude toward women persists everywhere, right? Not just a seminar issue. This is not just an aggressive seminar culture issue. I'm sure you know about this horrible site, Econ Job Market Rumors. In fact, this is how this all started a couple years ago, when a University of California, Berkeley student did a paper using data from this horrible sexist site. Basically, this work collects 100,000 posts from this site, and that's, those are discussing women and 3,000 discussing men. So in terms of number, male posts are more, but the interesting observation is female posts on average contain 43% less academic or professional terms, right? This site's supposed to talk about your paper or which job you are getting, right? That's the idea. But when it's about women, it is about either woman's physical appearance, or how if she's dumb or not, if the papers are her work or not. So non-academic stuff. And that's 196 times more for women than men. Okay, and this is true for women at all levels of profession. So it's not just for young people or senior people. Basically, the people who post on this site harass everyone. So a female post has significantly higher chance of triggering a deviation from professional topics than a male post. There has been a lot of action against EGMR by us, by AEA. I mean, AEA started its own site, and you can still post anonymously if you want, right? Nothing changed. So EGMR as active as ever. Unfortunately, my suggestion to you, don't go, don't visit, don't post in the site, because each time even you visit there, you are approving this type of behavior, and you are increasing the popularity of the site. And AEA has its own site posting, talking about papers and academics and all that, and you can do it actually anonymously. Now, given the extent of the problem, AEA did a professional climate survey a couple of years ago. In fact, with the leadership starting with the leadership of Ben Bernanke, Olivier Blanchard, and Janet Yellen. These are three presidents of the American Economic Association. They really put a lot of resources and effort on this problem. So we are in a much better place right now compared to, say, 2015. The survey is done for 10,000 economists. Response is a little bit low, but it is still very telling results. The response revealed that women, non-white men, LGBTQ individuals, individuals with disabilities, Muslims, they all have much worse experience in the profession and subject to more harassment. And it is almost like the other part doesn't know what is going on. So it's like, it's almost like two different professions, like total bipolar. You can see the results on the AEA webpage. I just put some examples here. When you ask the question, if you're satisfied with the overall climate in economics, 40% of the men satisfied, 20% of the women no. If you look at the harassment questions, obviously nothing going on with men. Like half of the women are this way or that way harassed, discriminated. And also the question about sexual harassment is very telling too. Nothing, of course, going on with men. But women from a minor to major is answering the question that they experience this in their careers. So what are the resources to deal with this problem? First of all, AEA, after this climate survey, put a task force in charge. I'm part of this task force. This is put together by Ben Bernanke to come up with resources. We did another survey, and basically, you know, I mean, there are now widespread agreement that there is a problem. I mean, even white men, if you look at this, when you ask, does the economy have a problem, a woman's problem, white man says, you know, not everyone, but at least 55% says there's a problem, right? So, of course, discrimination, they don't believe. If you look at the discrimination question, it is like around 15%. It's not important for economists to be inclusive. That's the low share, that's good. Satisfied with the overall climate. You know, this is again goes back to 40% of the men satisfied, only 15% of the women. And when you go to black women and all, it gets worse, okay? So there is definitely, you know, at least the agreement is getting more widespread that there's a problem here. As I said, AEA put a task force together, put by Ben Bernanke. We are a group of 6, and we put together a report, best practices for economists to build a more diverse, inclusive, and productive profession. This is again on AEA's website, and the report is long, but there is a snapshot where with the bullet points, you see that what can you do in your own institutions in terms of conducting research, in terms of serving as colleagues, in terms of working with students, and in terms of leading departments. Okay, so we put these bullet points so that it is very easable in one, it's very readable, very easy to read in 1 page or 2 page, so you can get the best practice in each area. Okay, I would definitely recommend you to look at that. A lot of department chairs are now making this a priority to go through this and kind of to trickle down the message in their faculties. And finally, in terms of reflection of all this, I mean, you might look at this from a perspective that, okay, fine, there is discrimination. So, I mean, people always thought there's a problem, but again, the working assumption and the strong underlying theme is because markets are efficient, there must be something wrong with women. I mean, it took a long time for people to come to the point that, you know, there is discrimination. Still, you know, if you do a, you know, poll right now to all economists, it's going to be less than 50%. In spite of these AER-JP papers, people are going to be in the minority who believes there is discrimination. When you ask women, they know that there is discrimination. But when you ask men, you know, not all, small portion is going to believe that. And of course, the profession is a male-dominated profession. But it is there, and you cannot deny it. And it is something, of course, existed thousands of years in many professions, right? I mean, economics is not unique here. So this is not a problem that is going to be solved overnight. But there are actually a lot of things you can do, both individually and collectively, that will improve the situation. So that is the point I want to get across. One of the most important things you can do as an organization is actually very boring and tedious. You just write down each process, right? For important decisions, for hiring, for seminar organization, for tenure, you just write down goal, criteria, and procedure, and then you publicize this with all the stakeholders and you follow through. So this is kind of about being diligent, right? You just be on top of this all the time, and you have to check all the time with the faculty members and the graduate students. So this is obviously the job of the department chair, but you know, the responsibility can be shared, right? So it doesn't have to fall on one person's shoulders. There are going to be mistakes made in the process. You are going to say or do things that hurt or offend other people. So the goal here is not never do this. I mean, these things happen. in seminars or other places. The goal is to be able to notice them and to talk about them. That requires building relationships with other people where they will tell you, you can discuss it and you can learn. So if you yourself or somebody else does this type of behavior in a seminar or during a hiring decision or during a tenure decision, then there has to be enough trust and a strong relationship that somebody else comes and talks to you and then somebody else like warns you, right? That's what is important here, kind of establishing a dialogue. And you have to be an ally. And here, again, one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King: in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So this bystander thing is really, really bad because there's power in numbers, right? If you don't say anything, if you just become a bystander, even you see the problem, even you know that there's a problem, you are adding to the problem, right? You are not doing anything to solve it. Of course, it is very hard. Valid reasons why bystanders don't intervene. And this is really mostly about graduate students and assistant professors because they are in a position of no power, especially in the case of sexual harassment. They will never come forward and talk about it, especially if that person is in a power position, like that person's advisors or professors. So this is a very, very difficult situation. But there are other ways you can deal with this, right? You can tell someone else, you can check in with the person afterwards, you can change the topic or be a distraction. I mean, so there are ways to deal with this, even you are afraid or shy to talk about these issues directly. So in several departments in the US, graduate students started many initiatives. They realized that if they come together, they are going to be powerful, which is true. They wrote a letter to AEA, and now they are doing the conference. They're organizing many conferences on this. They touch base with each other, so they kind of keep track of repeat offenders in the profession who are well known, actually, because at the end we all go to the same conferences and we see same people. So there is a lot of communication and solidarity among the graduate students from different departments in the US right now. But basically, there's a lot to do here in terms of what young people can achieve. You can, again, join forces with assistant professors and, of course, with senior professors, right? With people like me, because at my stage in my career, I'm not going to have a shyness or awkwardness or power imbalance problem, and I'm willing to help. So that's the other thing. You should always find people like me who can do something about this problem if you don't want to come forward yourself. Okay. And at the end, as I said, it's a collective responsibility. So diversity and inclusion is responsibility of everyone in an organization. Women are not responsible of solving sexism, right? I mean, this is not just women's responsibility. We cannot, frankly, do it alone. I mean, we are in a profession where we represent, the profession's 30%. We are not going to succeed in this unless the 70% of the profession comes through. Same thing with the minorities, right? African Americans are not responsible to solve the racism problem. So this is a collective issue. Living out the value that is a collective responsibility. And this relieves an enormous burden on underrepresented groups, leads to better outcomes for the organization. So it is a welfare improving attack, actually. And the problem is big, and it needs the ideas and creativity of everyone. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Hocam. It was a really informative presentation. If you like to ask, guys, you can just raise your hands and ask, or if you would like to contribute, you can contribute. I have a question before. Let me ask. Like we talk about the importance of the woman in contribution, not just for the sake of women, but for a diversification, how it leads a more productive outcomes, let me say. Hocam, also you talk about the best practices for economists that you were working on. My question is, how is it such a thing that applicable for the institutions? Like my concern is, can we observe institutions that applied such a things? How they engage women to contribute or more active or work less stress in their institutions? Is there such an policy or implications like that?
Yeah, so if you look at that, that's actually a very good report. We work over a year on it, and again, it was launched not this year, but last year's AEA meeting in a panel with Ben Bernanke and myself and other members of the task force. And we have actual suggestions how you achieve this. For example, when you are organizing your seminars, why this problem keeps persisting is because, of course, let's say you are doing it on a topic and you start thinking people. And of course, the first names come to your mind is going to be, famous people in that area, and that those people are generally men. I mean, imagine, you are doing a seminar on, monetary policy. You are going to think about Refat Hoca. You are doing a seminar on productivity and growth. You are going to think about Ufuk Hoca. So, and but you are just very quick, right? You write down those names and then you move on. You don't do a true job and then let me go out and see if there are, some women or underrepresented minorities who does equally good quality work. Okay. I mean, you can see how this becomes a doom loop, right? I mean, women are already in limited numbers and they are already shy and go to conferences less, especially because of this aggressive culture. So it is very hard to know about them, right? I mean, the minute you start organizing your conference or seminar, those names are not going to come to your mind. So you have to do your job diligently, spend time and really go and find that woman, if needed, read their papers, look at their recorded online presentations and invite them. I mean, when I was organizing the NBR Summer Institute, I spent so much time on this because, of course, I mean, I am busy, right? I write papers, I teach, I give, media interviews, and I have to do a 1 week long NBR Summer Institute program. I want to do it quickly. When I start thinking about names and when I start looking at the papers I'm selecting, I go with the names I know, with the good quality work I know. But then I said, okay, I'm not going to do this like this. I'm going to really take my time and see how much diversity I can bring. And it's amazing, actually. Once you start putting a lot of time and effort into this, there are really, really good work from diverse people, both women and underrepresented people. And during my tenure, I did this organization for 4 years. The women participation in the IFM group increased 60%, basically. So same thing with the discussants, right? You're also going to invite discussants. So it is always good to invite like assistant professor, young female assistant professor as discussant, because that's a chance for them to show themselves and also to be part of the group, because NBR is such a large networking group that, it is important that you become part of it early in your career. Same with CEPR, the European version. So these things fall on the organizer, right? Organizer has to do the job. This is just seminar and conference organization. Same with the hiring, right? When you are doing the hiring, of course, you are going to go through the applications, but you can, let's say you don't have any woman applicant or you don't have any minority applicant, you can go out your way and see, okay, well, I mean, I know this person, I just, saw a presentation or somebody, mentioned it, why that person didn't apply. You can be proactive. You can go and ask that person for an application, right? I mean, and then same with the, basically tenuring, right? I mean, when you are asking for tenure letters, make sure it is from a diverse set of people, not from just like 5 same old people, then that you are not going to get the diverse opinion. So each stage you can do actually a lot to bring in women, to bring in underrepresented minorities to the picture. It's just that you have to spend a lot of time on it, because those people are not the first names that will come to your mind. But in these best practices reports, NM, we have suggestions for all of these things, how to conduct research, how to, do a relationship with your graduate students, how to lead a department, how to organize seminars, do hiring, give tenure, based on the goal of increasing diversity in the profession. Yeah, we have actual suggestions that way. Any other questions?
Thank you, Hocam.
Hocam, I have a question.
Sure.
In the data that you showed the slides, I saw a trend that after 2007 and 8, there is always a dip in women's stats in the job markets and the education. So is there a bias that post financial crisis, there was something that increased the discrimination or restricted the numbers?
This is a very good question. So again, my field is not labor economist, but I have labor economist friend who actually does research on this question. We know now that financial crisis like 2000, 2008, 2007, 2008 one affects women disproportionately. We are living through right now a worse version of that. COVID crisis is actually going to be even worse than the financial crisis. because of this childcare side of the situation, because schools got closed. Normally during a financial crisis, schools don't get closed. And of course, women take care of the children at home. So there is definitely some of that for sure. I believe, and again, this literature is very fast moving literature, and I'm not a labor economist, but I believe we still don't know why recessions, financial crises, really have this disproportionate effect on women. I mean, of course, one explanation is again discrimination, right? You lose your job. As any recession, you lose your job, and when you are trying to find one, you are going to be discriminated again, and it's harder. It can be that women, also self-select, deciding to quit. Say, if there is some sort of family issue. This is going to be very relevant for the COVID because of this taking care of children. I think that's going to be the key reason why we will see a disproportionate effect on women in the job market. But this is a very active area of research, and there is definitely an effect of the crisis and recession, disproportionate effect on women. You're right.
Can, you can.
Thank you. Hocam, so thank you for your presentation, first of all.
Of course.
So there's this idea that when we solve, of course, there are many systematic obstacles in the path of equality, but when we solve, for example, some of them, some people assume that in time this will go in a better path, because sometimes it takes time for things to go 50-50%. It doesn't occur suddenly. And there are other people who say that, okay, but this might happen in a very long time, and why wait? Like, can't we just somehow make a positive discrimination and create that environment? And maybe that will even encourage more, that will increase the efficiency of our policies even more. But my issue with that is, and this is what I'm wondering, will that kind of a positive discrimination prevent us from looking at the system and observing, oh, what's wrong? Because that might also manipulate the data, because our positive discrimination is aimed for making the data look as we like it to be. So maybe we will look at the data and we will see, oh, our policy wasn't working that well. There must be something else that we are missing. So what is your idea on this?
I mean, so this is the holy grail, right? This is the crux of the issue, because there is going to be this side that says, look, if this is not discrimination, but this is just, again, you start from the market's, efficient point. Even there are these type of problems in an efficient market, they are going to disappear after a point. Again, assuming this is not discrimination, so we'll just let it be. Especially because if we now try to be this, kind of super nice people in seminars and don't criticize, and then we don't have the rigor of the discipline. Economics is a discipline that we debate, right? Economics is not physics, not math, not an exact science. It's a social science. We have to debate, and seminars and kind of, holding you to a very high standard is about, that debate becoming at a very high standard. So that's that group, right? So that group says we don't do anything because there's no discrimination, so our policies are right, and whatever problem, because the data is there. I mean, we know that women are a small part of the profession, so that's going to sort itself out. So this view now changed, because this was the view, I believe, like a lot in like kind of 90s, but now there is this evidence that it is actual discrimination. And also, it's not just the academics, right? It is also institutions like, central banks, IMF, OECD, policy institutions. More and more evidence is coming out that women are held to higher standards, and women are discriminated against in all walks of life, right? From undergraduate life to becoming a tenured professor in academia, or to become a manager or director in a policy institution. Because now we realize this, now we have to do something about it. That comes to this. Okay, the policy is right, but you are right. I mean, because we can still do a wrong policy, right? And what is the right policy, and how do you do it? So it's very hard. It's very hard. So it is something to realize there is discrimination. It's another thing, what is the right policy of solving this issue, right? So I mean, we are at the beginning. So we are at the infancy of this. So this report on best practices is just a first step, right? Janet Yellen, for example, argues that in workplaces like Federal Reserves, I mean, we can think about flexible schedules, right? I mean, the big thing, of course, with women, you know, they would like to be in a position where if they need to leave at 3 p.m. to pick up their child, they want to do that, but then they can work later, you know, after 7 p.m. So this should be allowed, for example. In academia, you can do this, but in institutions, you cannot. So is a proponent of these type of flexible work arrangements, which now we realize during COVID works great, actually, right? I mean, people actually have all sorts of flexible work schedules, and women make it work. So that's for example, one policy that is relevant for institutions. You know, another policy for academics is definitely, and this is a very good example for your wrong policy, this gender neutral leave, right? So your tenure clock stops. So I don't know if you know the system in America, but in America, when you become an assistant professor, you have this 5 year, and in 5 year, if you don't publish high quality work, you lose your job at the end of 5 years. If you do, then you get tenure, right? You become an associate professor. So if you have a child during that 5 year, which most women do, because that's pretty much when you are between, you know, 35 or 35 and 40, your tenure clock stops. You get a year. So that 5 year becomes 6 year, or if you're an institution with 6 year, that becomes 7 year. So we first thought, for the sake of equality, anybody who has a child should get this, right? Now we realize this hurts women more when men get this, because so this was a wrong policy, now should be corrected, for example. So it's going to be a little bit like learning by doing, right? So we can do wrong policies, and this goes back to my slide that there will be mistakes. So the goal is not to do them. The goal is to correct them, right? I mean, the goal is to do something. We should definitely not be in the other camp, in the first camp, saying, you know what, there's no discrimination, you know, there's no problem. Maybe there's a problem, but this will sort itself out in the future. In the steady state, we will be all a 50-50 profession. We cannot be doing that. So we should do something about it. But you are right that it is hard to pin down the right policies, and some of it is going to be by, you know, learning by doing and trial and error. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. It was really inspirational and unfortunate.
Of course, but let me tell you, I don't want this to be a pessimistic thing, right? I mean, when you see these numbers, yeah, when I first also saw them, like, oh my God, this is worse than I thought, right? Because you know your experience, but then when you realize, you know, how widespread it is, you feel very bad. But this shouldn't make us like feel negative and feel pessimistic. This should drive us to do something. Okay, that's how you should interpret this. Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask that what do you think about the education of economics? Do you think is it diverse? Because a couple of days ago in micro class, we were learning about game theory, and there was an example about the battle of sexes, where men wants to watch a football game and woman wants to go shopping, like.
Yeah, I mean, no, but this is also, of course, the part of the problem, right? But I mean, woman likes to go to shopping doesn't mean woman cannot do math and woman cannot do economics. First of all, let me just like clarify that. I like to go to shopping. I'm very good at math. So, I mean, but this is, of course, something affects networking. If you go to, this was, I think, 2 years ago, AEA, I was in a panel on this issue with Janet Yellen. And Janet Yellen said something very interesting. She was talking about her early days as an assistant professor at Harvard. I mean, so given Janet's age, you can see how far that back. She was actually the only woman, only assistant professor. And at lunchtime, or, you know, at, like after work, at dinner time or whatever, men get together, either talk about, you know, sports, or they get together to go to a, you know, match or something. And they don't ask her. And once she asks, actually, you know, she talks about it. You should go and watch this video. So, and she asked once, you know, can I also come? And then they're like, oh no, you won't like this. You like, you know, other stuff, shopping. So we are not inviting you. So they actually told to her face, whoever those assistant professors at Harvard then told to her face, no, you know, you can't come. We are not going to invite you. So of course, when they go and do these things, they also talk about papers. Then they start writing papers together. And then, you know, so this is like a whole kind of a cascading effect trickling down, which of course hurts women. So the solution to that is not, you know, women should stop liking shopping and like start liking, you know, sports stuff. Women also should do networking with other women, and women should find other ways of doing networking in men, and men should be open to that, right? I mean, you know, you can go to lunch and dinner and talk about economics, right? You don't have to talk about match. And then actually women networking with women is also very important. I don't know if you were following this, but the last couple of years we started women-only conferences. both in macro and international macro. Micro people already had them. So micro people are a little bit ahead of us because they are more. So labor already had a conference like that. That's when I realized actually, oh my God, why don't we have it? So I started the Women in International Economics Conference, and Veronica Grori at Chicago, together with Mariana Azimonti at New York State. Where is she? NYU, I think, or upstate New York. They started this Women in Macro Conference, and Alessandra Perry at Minnesota Fed. So the entire body of the conference is women, first of all. Everyone, grad student, assistant professor, associate professor, tenure, everybody. It is still an economic conference. So the Women in Macro is on macro topics, ours is on international topics. And this year one, for example, we have the keynote speech given by Geeta Gopinath, who is the chief economist at the International Monetary Fund. So during the papers, first of all, it is your regular econ conference, less aggressive, which is very good. So, I mean, we actually proved that other camp wrong, right? The camp that says, oh, okay, if we don't ask these questions, and if we don't criticize, the profession is going to lose the rigor. No, I mean, we can be as rigorous. We are just polite. We just ask the question. We just don't, you can ask the same tough question. You can do the same tough critique, being nice and without interrupting that person like every minute, right? You can still achieve the same thing. That's, first of all, came out very nicely. People are very civilized and still very rigorous conferences both. And the second thing we realized is during lunch and dinners, now the conversation, of course, is not sports, but the conversation is kids, how to make time for all sorts of, school-related stuff, shopping, of course, for people who don't have kids. So, I mean, all these type of topics, which it turns out are actually also very useful because, you also use those topics to network. So there is going to be more and more of that, but these are just all different steps, right? They are all partial solutions. At the end of the day, none of them is going to be the solution. We have to be doing a lot, and come together to solve this problem. But at the end of the day, I mean, that kind of battle of sexes, or like, they are different, has nothing to do with being successful in economics, right? Or being good at math, or being like in the finance field, for example. This type of stuff also used a lot for math intensive parts of the field, right? So this is very important to understand, because I mean, of course, there is this, part that women are more shy and they are less aggressive. That is true, right? And that's exactly work against you, because in the seminar environment, our seminars, the more aggressive you are, the more, bullying you do, you win in that seminar. So that culture needs to change. And this is something very interesting here. So during my career, I mean, I realized this from day one, right? Day one, you are in this environment and like, you are like, okay, just great. But then you tell yourself, well, I picked this field, I'm going to go through with it. So our generation reaction to this environment is like, I'm going to operate within these boundaries. And in fact, in that panel, AEA panel with Jen Leon, I said that I used to be a much more more smooth, kind of a less aggressive person in high school and college. But I changed, of course, over the years, because at some point you have to keep your ground. If somebody's yelling at you and bullying you, you either give up or you have to do something back, right? Otherwise, you can't present anything. So this does happen, because people like me, our generation, we said, okay, we are just going to operate within this environment, within these constraints. Young people like you, I've been to many graduate student seminars, young assistant professors. I am doing mentoring in CSWEP. Young people said, no, I'm not going to operate in this environment. I'm not going to do like you. I am not going to change myself. I'm going to still be shy. I'm going to be less aggressive. And I want the environment to change. Okay, so this is a big change. So this young group says, these constraints have to change. This environment has to change. And I think that is like very liberating. I think this is super exciting. And we as senior people, we are trying to help that we really change the profession and the environment so the young people don't have to change themselves.
Okay, guys, any questions? I think, okay, come on. Let's take as a last question, then finish it.
Maybe as a last question, if you still have time, I would like to ask something. So is it possible to establish a mechanism that scrutinizes these bullies and perhaps punishes them in these conferences, seminars, but not to, discourage this kind of behavior, and also make it more visible, make it more visible that it's not okay to do so? Is it possible to establish such things?
Yeah, this is the very good question. This is actually what has been being discussed a lot in the last couple of years, both in terms of bullies and kind of these annoying people, and also to the limit, if you take it to the maximum, that will be the sexual offenders, right? Now, so the sexual offenders are known, to all women, because they do the same thing at every AEA meeting, at every, conference. So, and now AEA hired an ombudsperson exactly for this. So, and in the panel that I told you about, if you go and watch, when we presented the best practices report with Ben Bernanke introduced this person. She's a lawyer, and this is her job, basically. During these type of events, conferences, if you observe harassment, sexual or not, you go to this person. Mostly, of course, the sexual ones are going to be the most serious ones. You go to this person and you tell who that person is, and you give the name and all that. Now, when this was being explained, audience asked exactly the same question that you ask, and then it's okay, fine. This ombudsperson that Ben Bernanke hired, AEA hired, will know the names, but she's a lawyer and she can't do really anything legally until there's kind of a court case and there's a legal case, right? She will just know the names, right? And that's it. So we will not know. So she knows, okay, say the president of the AEA, and we will just, this will not do anything, basically. That's kind of the person asked the question, but then the rest of the question is, well, how this will help? She, of course, answered as a lawyer, yes, this has no, legal ramification, because that person tells me this person did this to me in the elevator, or asked me out, or whatever, or, bullied me in a seminar, doesn't mean that lawyer can't do anything. That's how that ombudsperson answered the question. But then Ben Bernanke said, yeah, but we know the names, and that's it. And he didn't say anything else. Meaning, of course, yeah, then there was this whole Twitter thing. Everybody's interpreting that person is not going to be an editor at the AER. That person is not going to be in an important position, right? This is true progress. I mean, the fact that I think somebody like Ben Bernanke, that everybody takes so seriously, said that, yeah, but we know the names, is just so much, right? This is one of these things, like you just use 3 words, but you say so much to the world, right? And I was so excited. I'm like, oh my God, this is like huge step, because that's what it is. And in fact, something like that happened last year. One of the top journals, one of the editors were changing, and one of these type of offenders put up, and everybody started a huge email campaign. No, this person cannot be an editor, because that's how the problem continues, right? When that person comes to a job like that, and then women's paper come, the person is going to obviously discriminate that paper, right? So there is going to be limits what you can do, but if powerful people know these names and do something about it, and then kind of give this sense to the profession, I think we can achieve a lot. Yeah. Any other questions? Teşekkürler Kıvanç. Başka?
I just noticed this, like there have been only 2 women who have won Nobel Prize in economics. So yeah. Do you think this thing comes from all these problems that we discussed?
Yes, of course. You start from a very low bar, right? Where I'm sure there were others worthy of, but first you are held to higher standards. Second, you are only 30% of the profession. That's no brainer, right? So, and the Nobel is like the ultimate point.
Yeah, also I saw this newspaper, there was a piece of article that Esther Duflo was referred to as the wife of Abhijit Banerjee, yeah. And there was a huge backlash over that, and like,
yeah, sure. They did it all the time. Yeah. Janet Yellen used to be referred to wife of George Akerlof, right? So these people, they actually, when you talk to that age group, older, so this is Janet, of course, much older than both me and Esther is older than me. So when you talk to kind of older generation, their stories are horrific. When I talk to them, I feel like, okay, I had it better than them. And then young people now are going to have even better, because they are trying to change the environment. That generation tells you stories about, at the job market interview, when they are, interviewing for the job, they were asked questions like, are you planning to have kids? If you are planning to have kids, you cannot be a serious economist. I heard this from so many, women from that up generation. This is the generation of, Nancy Stolke and, all that kind of group. So this is just unbelievable. That's, you have to choose between being an academic economist and having kids. So that's a choice. So I didn't experience it. Our generation didn't experience that. So there's already, but this is such a slow progress. It's such a slow progress. This whole thing started in the 70s. CSWEP established at the end of 70s. And when you talk to micro people, because there are more, they really, really gave many battles. And they are saying that there's a really good momentum right now. And I think that's because, famous men put their weight behind it, like Ben Bernanke, like Olivier Blanchard. I think it's very important that, men gets behind it. This is very important. I mean, women are not going to solve this problem. And that's what the micro women tried in 80s and 90s. I mean, it's not just going to work. Only women cannot solve it. We really need a significant part of men and famous men really to push this cause. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hajam, for your time. And I think we are about to wrap up this up if there are no questions. Sanam?
Yes, thank you, everyone again. Can, is it a last minute question?
If our professor wants to answer, if she's okay with her schedule, I would like to ask one more thing.
Sure.
So I think another form of discrimination that exists in academia is pushing people to work in a specific area because of their gender, sexual orientation. For example, I'm not sure how much I have seen this in economics, but I know that in political science, there is this culture that, oh, so you are interested in women issues. So, okay, then you can go to that center and work there. You don't have to be a part of the department. And there's this push away culture where, oh, so you are kind of interested in women issues, then you can go and work there. Yeah. And this causes women, homosexual, or people with different sexual identities to be pushed away from the already established community of these academic units. Do you think this kind of situation also exists in economics? If it does, in what form?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely the figure I showed you. So in economics, it is not that much, I think, pushing, but it's more self-selection. I have many graduate students coming to me and say, they want to, work with me and they want to be in, finance and international, but they saw some of the seminars and they are horrified, so they are going to go and do labor. So they select it. So they are pushed by the environment. I mean, if you will, if you want to put it with your terminology, but they self-select. And of course, they know that if they go and do labor, they will definitely work with a woman professor and they will actually write more with women. So they know that they're already getting in an environment where there will be more women. Later, when they are in a seminar room, they won't be the single woman in a room. I so many times early in my career was the only woman in a room of 40 people. I mean, 39 men and me. So many times, I asked a question and people didn't pay attention. And then the same question asked 5 minutes after me by my male colleague. And then everybody, oh, that's such a great question, Ryu. So, I mean, at that point, I was so shocked that it can be this obvious. I didn't say it. Now, of course, first people don't do this to me. And if I see it is done to another person, I immediately say, okay, but just wait a minute. Senem just asked the same question before you, Can, right? I immediately correct. And more senior women do that. Of course, young people cannot do that because they don't want to be labeled as this, annoying person. But senior women can do that. Senior men can do that, and senior men should do that, right? So, but all these things are going to, in a way, cause this self-selection or push, if you will. And this is bad because this is bad for macro international finance. Okay, one recent example to you. Look at the inflation debate right now. I mean, I was actually at Bloomberg just before this, which is very good. So Bloomberg did the right thing that, they asked my opinions. But look at the inflation debate in the US. Who is talking in the inflation debate? 3 men, 3 white old men, right? There are tons of, and Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary. I mean, because she has to obviously talk about it. I mean, she's the Treasury Secretary. So you have to be Treasury Secretary if, as a woman, you have a view about inflation. There are tons of women about, talking about inflation. The main media is not covering it. Media just keeps covering the same old white men. This is a huge problem in macro. It's a huge problem in finance. So we just will keep working at it. Any other questions? Bu kadar herhalde. Başka.
Hocam, you said that mainstream media is covering the 3 white old women. Yeah. Can we say it's the part of the capitalism that they show what is being sold, what they are earning more from and not exactly what they want to do? So
no, I don't think it's part of the capitalism. I think it's part of just being lazy and not being due diligent and not doing your job. I mean, they are just not looking, right? I mean, this is exactly, what I was trying to tell with the seminar organization. You know, these are the known names. Okay, Krugman, Summers, Blanchard. So they just go and look at what they say, and they just ignore all the other women who also had very, very good views. I mean, Geeta Gopinath, chief economist of the IMF. I mean, just put out something super interesting about inflation. I don't see it being covered. I mean, she's the chief economist of the IMF, and she said actually new things compared to others, right? I mean, so this is just a bias. This is just this bias, discrimination. It is so inherent that we don't even know we are doing it. I'm not saying, you know, media is doing it on purpose. By the way, none of this stuff I said today is like people are mean and doing it purpose. There are offenders, there are bullies, as Kıvanç asked, there are sexual offenders, but most of it, but this is still going to be the, you know, rare. Most of it is actually being done unconsciously, unrealized, you know, not because of being mean. It's just that, you know, you don't do your job right. You don't look around and who is saying what, and you just, you know, doing it without knowing it. So that's the part we should work at. Okay.
Thank you, Hocam.
I think we are okay right now. As you said, Hocam, nothing to look at with the negative side. We should consider the positive side that women is more and more contributing both economics and the world, the other fields. And it's a really great to see like an economist like you in here that presenting this presentation to us. So thank you for joining us today. We really, I think for both of us, it will be really beneficial. And hope to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senem and Kıvanç. And let me finish on a positive note. I fully agree. This should energize us, and then we should do more about it. So CEPR is starting in the partnership with UBS, a Women in Economics podcast series. At the end of March, they are going to start. It's going to be super good. They are going to start with Esther Duflo, of course, but I will do one of it. You know, all the women, you know, in economics, we will do a podcast, and it's going to cover all sorts of issues. So you should definitely start watching that, and then make others also watch it too. Okay?
Thank you so much hocam.
Teşekkürler çocuklar. Çok sağ olun.
Teşekkür ederiz.
Çok sağ olun.
Görüşmek üzere.
Başarılar. Görüşmek üzere. Güle güle. Bye bye.